Welcome to Lorian Live. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you. And I'm very excited to introduce my guest today. Erick Mahle and I are going to dive in and talk about your Salesforce destiny and customizing your career path, really talk about roles and opportunities. And Erick has a tremendous background in the space and has really had a journey. So, welcome, Erick. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure finally get a chance to do one of these together.
Yes, absolutely. And it's such a small world. We were just connecting some dots. It's one of the things I really love about the Salesforce ecosystem is just how many relationships you can build, and technology and LinkedIn lives and conferences really makes it easy for us to all stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely a connected Ohana.
Absolutely. And Erick, you come to the table here today with kind of an interesting combination of backgrounds, but you are a co-founder of Ohanali, which you're going to share with us about. You also are the senior director of CRM at First Advantage. So you have this really unique perspective of somebody that has been in a corporate role, a leadership role, freelancer, contractor, and helped other people with their careers as well. So I'd love for you to just take a few minutes and maybe paint the background of your career. And I know you have little ones and your wife is newer into the Salesforce ecosystem. So it's a family affair at this point.
Yeah, it definitely is. We're definitely a Salesforce family at this point, and I see a couple of folks that I recognize. So hi to May and some of the other folks that are there. Feel free to share where you guys are joining us all from today. And from my end, I started as many start as the accidental admin back in 2010. My background is in sales and marketing, and in small organizations, it just ends up that you wear the Salesforce admin hat. And I've always found a passion for it. I always considered it to be like the grown up version of Legos, and love putting things together. Started getting more passionate, and in 2013, an opportunity presented itself. Way before the days of Trailhead and all these other things. It was LinkedIn groups at the time, and the company that I was in chose to go in a different direction with a lot of things. My boss had left. I wasn't super happy with it, and this opportunity presented itself, and I decided to take it as a contractor for a Salesforce implementation. And from there on, I just decided to try to say, hey, can I make this work? And from 2013 to 2019, I grew a small consulting firm, and then in 2020, with a former work colleague of mine, I co-founded Ohanali. We're a platform for independent freelancers. And but equally at the same time, like the planets aligned, some personal reasons aligned really well as well, and I decided to jump into the client side for the first time since 2013, and as a senior director of CRM at First Advantage. And it's, between being on the client side, having all the experience from the independent consulting, and helping to shape Ohanali that way, from being husband to wife that's getting into the Salesforce ecosystem and now is in the Salesforce ecosystem. It's definitely been an interesting couple of years to see how the community has grown, and the ecosystem has grown as a result.
Well, there's so many changes that have happened, obviously, this with Trailhead and certifications, and now the economy making some changes. And I think for a lot of people that, you know, they're concerned, right, about what do I do next? Many people have found themselves out of their full-time roles, trying to figure out what do I do next. Others who may be still working are trying to decide, how do I make sure to stay really relevant? Should I start something on the side? Does that make sense to do some freelancing? When would I consider doing that? There's others who have been in those independent roles and are looking at, sometimes I think it sounds easier or more glamorous than it is. The actual work of running a business, not the Salesforce work, but the actual business side of it can be really daunting for someone who may not have expected that. And looking, should I go back into the corporate environment? So there's a lot of decisions to make. What would you say really surprised you along the way of maybe what you thought it was going to be like to be a contractor or freelance to moving into corporate? Are there some elements that you weren't expecting, or the people maybe that you work with Ohana or in other roles, have you seen them sort of face that they didn't think about in advance?
I I wasn't surprised. I think jumping in the corporate world or on the client side as a senior director of CRM, a lot got validated. I've always seen a lot of things from the side of the consultant working with corporations, got heavily involved with many departments when we're doing implementations. And you always hear from the Ohana, there's the pros and cons of being on the consultant side. There's the pros and cons of being on the client side. And there was a lot of validation in being on the client side now. And it was interesting because you get a better understanding of how all the pieces work, especially at a leadership level, as I am right now. And you realize how at times it takes a greater effort to make sure that all of the departments are aligned, and how much it can take to move to get everyone behind an initiative, because you're moving something here for one department, you may affect something for someone else. And especially as corporations get bigger, you're talking about organizations that have integrations, things like that. It's something that you can't just be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go build this flow here in production and everything's solved. No, there's like there's a methodology, or there's a process that you need to put in place, right, to make sure that everyone's happy, that everything goes well. And so kind of getting back in touch with that was something that was really interesting, because on the consulting side, you just keep keep close eyes on your hours, do what's in the scope of work of what you need to do. Anything else, you got to get an out of scope form. But ultimately, you're always like an arm's length away from the clients and the departments. And if someone needs to talk to another department, that's their problem to figure it all out. You're just there to do the work you're being contracted to do. So yeah, it's definitely something that it's interesting, because people that I've come across earlier in their journey in Salesforce really struggle to know where they're best suited, because the client side is a very different environment than the consulting side, which is a very different environment than the independent consulting side. So it's been really cool to be able to participate and share stories and experience that help folks kind of better understand where do they best fit into this ecosystem.
How do you approach that conversation? So if you were thinking in terms of those who are watching and they're trying to evaluate, what do I do next? There's almost so many choices. I think one thing that's exciting about Salesforce is now there's so many clouds, there's so many initiatives, there's almost unlimited types of roles. But what would you say are maybe the key areas to think about and consider and in trying to determine which would be the best fit or the best fit for a season?
So it's tough to standardize all that into one, right? But if anyone's watching, feel free to comment. I'm looking at the comments, how long you've been in the ecosystem, and I can try to gear some of the comments towards that. But if you're starting out and you're within your first 2 years, if you're client side or you're in the consulting side, the first thing is just gain experience. Gain experience, become familiar, understand how the system works. You may not have all of the experience that you need to be able to go on as an independent consulting. We had times that folks were coming with zero consulting and basically were or zero Salesforce experience and wanted to get into consulting. And I'm like, at a consulting level, folks expect you to know what you're doing, right? They're hiring you as a specialist to be consulted on how to do something. If you haven't been in several Salesforce instances, if you haven't had a couple of years to know what works or what doesn't, because Salesforce has 10 different ways to solve a problem. If you don't know how to properly evaluate and say, hey, out of these 10 answers I found on Google, this is the one that makes sense because of how you're structured, or this is going to get you to scale, you run into a risk. So 0 to 2 years, get the experience that you can. And again, we can talk about the pros and cons of client side versus consulting side, but you can even start on the consulting side. There's a lot of consulting firms out there, large consulting firms that will have programs to bring people up. So there are things like that. Um, and make sure that you're working, if you're starting in 0 to 2 years, make sure that you work for an organization that has a senior figure in Salesforce. Don't take the whole weight of the CRM on your shoulders. A lot of times companies try to hire a junior admin when there's no admin in place because the salaries might be too expensive or whatever have you, and you'll run into a challenge there, right? And because you're going to put the whole weight of the CRM on your shoulders, and it might not be a good fit for the company and for yourself. So if you're in the 0 to 2 years, you got to just take what you can, but make sure you're well structured for success. If you're above 2 years, like 2 to 4 years, then this is the time that specialization starts to come into play. You mentioned niche with all the clouds that are coming aboard. This is a whole new thing that started maybe a couple of years ago, because now there's just so many clouds out there. And I can tell you right now, I recently got a chance to do a bot implementation, an Einstein bot implementation, and I scoured my entire network for Salesforce experts. And there are some really good bot experts out there, but they're tied to jobs, right? And they're few and far in between. We got a lot of help, but there are not a lot of bot experts out there, right? If someone were to come out and say, I'm a bot expert, I'm an independent consultant, I know everything there is to know about Einstein bots, please take my money. And that's just an example, right? You have financial services cloud. There's so much that you need to know there. Field service lightning. You could go to Heroku, MuleSoft. I'm just scratching the surface. We can go for ages. Einstein CRM Analytics, whatever it's called nowadays. Experience Cloud, Service Cloud, Sales Cloud, Marketing Cloud Pardot, or Marketing Cloud Account Engagement, because Pardot's too tough to say. So at that point, if you're in the 2 to 4 year range, finding that niche is a good option. But the second piece of the 2 to 4 year range is flows. So it's the hot new thing. Everyone's talking about it, but everyone's talking about it for a reason. Because 5 years ago, before 2017, before Lightning Flow came out, it was Visual Flow. Aging myself here terribly. And before that, flows didn't play a big role. And if you asked anybody, there were two categories. You're either a Salesforce admin or a Salesforce developer. That's it. There's no in between. Today, with the power that Flow gives someone declaratively with point and click, there's a clear new category. There are Salesforce admins that know Flow, and then Salesforce developers. Because it's that stark of a difference between an admin that's familiar with putting reports in dashboard, closing some user visibility ticket items, whatever the case may be, and someone who can really do quite a lot with flows in an organization. So having experience in flows is becoming crucial because it's increasing your power of what you can do. And if you tie that in with some of the great components out there, or some of the great folks from like unofficial Salesforce that have these amazing components that you can use to power up your flows even further, I mean, that's a whole new level of gameplay, right? So like on the 2 to 4 years, those are the two big things. Like, either start focusing on a niche market. I know a couple of folks that I've worked with many years ago. One girl in particular, she was like, I want to become a field service lightning expert. And today, she's a field service lightning rock star. Like, if I have a field service lightning question, like I don't even think twice. I was like, she's the one that I'm going to. And, flow is, like I mentioned, it's just becoming far more relevant. So it just becomes a crucial piece to kind of know and master. And on the 5 years and beyond, or 4 years and beyond, I know Marilyn was mentioning, looking at a managerial role. So this is an interesting one, right? You have to kind of make that decision for yourself. If you like a managerial role, if you like to influence, actually Salesforce Ben has a great infographic that I'm not going to find right now, but he basically describes the reasons why people jump, or different job titles and job hierarchies on the consulting side, on the ISV side, on the client side, and he has lines in between with the reasons as to why someone would jump from one side to another. And that kind of hits the heart of what you're saying, Marilyn, where if you're going to a managerial role, it's really because you want to leverage your expertise and help share and build a team. which I'm getting the chance to do that right now as a senior director of CRM at First Advantage. And it's been amazing. Like my first 8 months, we managed to build a Salesforce team with this economy and everything. And we're in the middle of a large implementation for the customer care team. I see Nate here, so hey, Nate. And so there's a lot there, right? And if you want to keep your hands there, keep your hands dirty and keep current on your skills, maybe the consulting side is something that's more suited for you. Because as you start getting bigger and bigger into the managerial side, then it's something that you'll have less and less of an opportunity to do. There's a lot that I can go in there with that, but hopefully I managed to try to categorize at least a couple of different ways depending where you are in your journey in the ecosystem. So
Yes,
Deb,
excellent.
thank you for that. I haven't clicked the link, but I see I'm assuming the infographic
Awesome.
is there. So yes, follow that link right there.
Yes, thanks, Deb. I figured somebody would do it. I was waiting for the link to show up. If not, I was going to say we'd post it. So that's interesting. So you've been looking to, well, you have built out your team. So when you obviously your go-to for a few things, but if you're searching for someone, so in that instance, like with the Einstein bot capability, why don't you share what somebody can do on LinkedIn, on their resume, with how could somebody kind of carve that out? And if somebody really wanted to be known for flows and they've invested the time, how would you, if you didn't know about them already, what could I do as a candidate to really show up for you as somebody who's building your team? And what could I do? What actions could I take that could help in that way?
Attend Flowfest and win. for for those that aren't aware, I host Flowfest with Ben McCarthy and a lot of great flow influencers. And but more to your point, the biggest thing, and I don't see enough people doing this, is that you have the ability, and there's a trailhead on it, to build your own free experience site where you can build your portfolio. I see some folks do it. I'm surprised that more people don't take advantage of this. As I see them in my feed, I share it just to give more visibility because I really applaud the folks that do their experience site, but realize that you can put your flows in experience site. Come up with a wild contact us form that is covered in great unofficial Salesforce add-ons that could really kind of help out or showcase your skill set. Come up with some interesting ways to be able to show your expertise on this experience site. And a lot of folks talk about generating content and doing all these things. I'm partial to that. I understand that generating content increases your visibility. I'm still more partial to networking a little bit more, but there's clearly different methods that work. So, but overall, if you have that business card that is your experience site, that is one of the biggest things that I've seen. That it's like, here, we had a great conversation. Check this out. Buy a domain on Google for like $10 or something like that. That it's like, hey, my first name, last name, dot, sites or whatever, anything, right? You can find a domain that's super easy to remember, just redirect directly to your experience site and boom, like kill them with a killer presentation. Best first impression you can do. That's my 2 cents. Or do something that you could do it right then on the spot, right? Like maybe you can do something that the URL or the domain you get redirects to a page on your experience site that launches a flow right away, almost kind of like a QR code scan or something that they could fill out and immediately, right? And then afterwards, it can redirect them to the front page and they can navigate, right? After you wow them with some cool demonstration and say, yeah, I did that all by myself. I should,
Love that. And
like
you could,
imagine what I can do for you.
yeah.
So yeah, those are some of the big things that for sure I think are going to be relevant.
Perfect. I've seen some people use that, put it in their featured section of LinkedIn. So when somebody lands, they're seeing that right away. And it's a great way to showcase that you're working on those things. I really appreciate what you said about networking. And I'd like to I guess, narrow this conversation down a little bit. So let's say that we're talking about somebody that has 2+ years. So getting started is at one level of networking, but let's say you have some experience, you have some skills. What when you say, networking, what works? So now you've been on both sides, right? You've been in a lot of the roles, but what type of networking, how can somebody approach you in your role? Now that you're on this side of it, how do people get your attention? What can they do or say that maybe you appreciate today that you didn't necessarily have the same insight in the past when you were the person trying to get to those individuals?
Closest way to my heart is free Formula One tickets to like the VIP passes or something like that. You'll have my full undivided attention. The I mean, with regards to networking, I think that the important part is that as you're in your journey, make colleagues. I love the conferences. Like the Florida Dreaming last year was a pivotal moment for my wife in her trying to get into the Salesforce ecosystem. She met so many people, got so much feedback, so many follow-ups that she kept conversation with. Equally, just from myself on the Dreaming events, and just generally knowing folks, like even consulting firms that we're working with, and people that I've done consulting for in the past, those those relationships kind of carry on. It's not uncommon that folks come to me and say, hey, I'm hiring for something like this, do you know somebody? Or equally, I've had times that people reach out and it's like, hey, I have a colleague of mine, he's looking for an opportunity XYZ, whether hey, here's a consultant looking to jump into client side, or any XYZ reasons. And that's really valuable, right? Because usually if it comes with that kind of a reference, that kind of a point, actually, case in point, one of the folks that we hired, the most recent hire, we have someone starting next week, but the most recent hire to date was a referral from another hire. So it's those kind of things that being in that radar, building that network, is really what makes it interesting in the 2 to 4 year range, because at that point you might have had the opportunity to go to a couple user group sessions or a couple of dreaming conferences, or play your part in the community, however it is that you prefer, to start building some connections that may help you find opportunities later in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I always think that it's good right now for people to hear about the positives and the bright future. So I found it interesting as you and I talked getting prepared for today, and you shared more of your wife's story, right? Of choosing to get involved in Salesforce and getting certified and going to Florida Dreaming. And that that choice, right, to have a family with both parents in Salesforce, you didn't do that lightly. So could you share just your thoughts about the opportunities within the ecosystem, and in spite of layoffs and some economic bumps, what do you where do you think the bright spots are?
I My optimism in the tough situation that the economy is in comes from the fact that I mentioned in the LinkedIn article that I wrote at the beginning of the year, this is the year of optimizations. This is the year that companies are looking down and tightening their spends and trying to get more with less. And who is better positioned to help an organization do that from a business side than a Salesforce administrator or a Salesforce expert? This is the time that this is the call to action for Salesforce administrators. And this is the call to action for Salesforce administrators to really hone their skills on things like automation, on reports and dashboards to show things that are falling through the cracks, on perhaps establishing integrations with middleware to connect systems together, to eliminate a couple of processes and simplify some processes. It's it's no surprise that a lot of companies are having hard times, but I struggle. And yes, Salesforce is on the news consistently about layoffs and things like that, but I don't hear a lot of layoffs with regards to admins, not nearly as much. I can't think of an example right now. It might have happened, but I can't think of an example right now of someone who is in a rolling up your sleeves and getting work done position, admin, consultant, or anything that's getting let go. So every time it comes up on my feed, it's more on the business development side, the customer service side. So from a Salesforce ecosystem perspective, I think that the ecosystem is far it's in far better shape than most of the economy. Which it's not a bragging right, but it should come as a sigh of relief. Be thankful for what you have. Be thankful for the ecosystem that you're in. Um, focus focus on yourself and continue to do a good job. And overall, you should be okay. It would be my impression. It's definitely easier to be in the Salesforce ecosystem than it is to be in other areas right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree, and it's just so it's nice to know that the future is bright in terms of being able to get your expertise in and to take that. And I hope people listen to you from the ear of how to address some interview questions for those of you who are actively interviewing or may find yourself in that situation. Eric, I think what you said and being able to tie questions to interviewing back about having impact, business impact, saving money. And I think one of the things that's so interesting right now, and you can't go 30 seconds on LinkedIn without seeing GPT and Chat GPT and all the AI. And I think there's some worry about, what does this mean for my job? What am I going to do? What are your thoughts about GPT and everything bubbling up and for all of us really, what's some good advice about how to deal with it?
It's interesting because we're moving at a fast pace with GPT. Um, there's a lot to unpack there. But in what I've understood so far, and I'm probably not the most well versed person in GPT. I've dabbled with it a bit. I'm reading it on the news. I'm studying it here and there. I still don't see how Einstein GPT or Chat GPT is going to be taking away people's jobs. I see that this is going to be far more better suited as a assistant. So I was having a conversation actually, what was it, Tuesday night at dinner with a developer, and we were having dinner, and he was explaining how he's encouraging all of his colleagues to use. He's a lead developer. He's encouraging all of his team members to use ChatGPT to help validate code. And that's a crucial part. It's validate code because someone still needs to be there to help validate and make sure that what they're doing is correct. An alarm, especially ChatGPT 4? It's an alarming success rate, like very, very strong success rate. However, there are still those final points that you still need to make sure you have someone there to help finalize those pieces. And in a world that we're looking for optimizations and things of that nature, it helps you do more work with less effort. And I hear a lot of folks writing test classes with ChatGPT, and so there's a lot of opportunity there. But I think the fear, at least right now, in most part, comes from the fact that there's an unknown there. And people tend to have fear because of an unknown. It's like, oh, this all powerful thing and all of this thing. I think that as people start finding the place, like this is too much news, too much power, too fast. As everyone starts realizing what can and can't be done, where Einstein GPT or Chat GPT kind of sits in the ecosystem and finds its place in the ecosystem, I think a lot of people will be a lot calmer with that piece. And it's definitely something that, like flows, is a massive advantage to know right now. And my camera's not run by GPT, or either that, or it's like trying to cut me off from what I have to say. I think that ultimately it's going to play a big role on, again, your productivity and how much work you can get done. There's so many places where it's going to be amazing. Like if you have to write email copy, like the Pardot folks, writing email copy quickly that perhaps even has the merge fields and all these other items. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff that you can probably do. So I see it more as a productivity tool, not as a job replacement.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating. I use it every day. I pay for it to get access to for because it doesn't have as many limits, and it just helps me in so many ways, and it's all productivity based. It's a lot of hours that it didn't cut the hours out. It's shifted the hours to things that I'm much more excited about and lean into where I can add value versus other elements. But when I first got certified, I had never seen Service Cloud before because I came from a sales, management role. All of that made sense, but the service side, I just saw an incredible opportunity. So I took a customer service role. It was a 60-day role to do enrollment for benefit enrollment. And it was so painful trying to get to all the information and trying to read through. And it was these calls were taking 30, 40 minutes. And with GPT technology, I could absolutely see how that 40-minute call could turn into 4.5 minutes, which would have been an amazing experience for everyone involved. So I hope that people will embrace learning and exploring and recognize that there's some wins in it that will help so much. And being somebody who can showcase that a bit on their resume or LinkedIn, just that they're willing to lean into technical change. I think that's something that can be a benefit. As a hiring manager, I'm assuming seeing that somebody can be flexible and continue learning because Salesforce is not going to stay the same. It's not staying the same for months, much less years.
Yeah, absolutely. And Monica brought up a good point on the chat. The biggest piece I think that ultimately we have to recognize is that we're just learning. We can't shut our minds to it and say no, I'm not touching this because it's too scary or this is happening. But again, I think the easiest way that I can summarize is there's a lot of things, right? Like, can I use this for decisions? Can I use this for support? And again, we're all having questions that are slowly getting answers, so I feel like it'll find its place. And just like many tools and many other things out there, that AI to this level will find its place, and we'll find a way to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the elements of your career that I noticed, and I know it's something that I did a lot last year, was taking the opportunity to speak and to have, just have a chance to get involved and join a committee on the dreaming conferences or become a speaker. And you don't have to be an expert in you don't have to have 20 years of experience to be a really valuable speaker and to have that experience or even to go for that, right? And go through the process of learning. What do people want to hear about and learn about? Being willing to lean into that. What can you tell a little bit about just your journey? I know you've had quite a bit of opportunity to speak and do sessions virtual, be a presenter in person.
Yeah. So from my side, I've always been a big fan of networking, just meeting folks out there, and it's one of the larger challenges in a virtual world that is Salesforce. So I always take advantage of an opportunity to meet folks. And fortunately, there's always been a good amount of experience that I've had, or people seem to really enjoy some of the things that I've had to share throughout the years. So for me, it's very natural to turn to speaking. And it gives me an opportunity to go travel, connect with folks, learn from folks. A lot of times you're presenting things and it leads to amazing conversations. I know that one of the presentations that usually gets a lot of conversation is my presentation on how to use the leads object. And that is, and you learn a lot, and sometimes people challenge the concepts or explain how they're using it, and you just get to know people that way and get to know how everything's evolving, right? So my leads presentation has been has like improved over the years to new functionalities, new things, and it's all based on a lot of what you're learning in conferences. So I've always really appreciated it. I've always really enjoyed the opportunity. So this year I'm not getting a chance to do as many just because I have quite a lot going on, and I'm dedicating a lot of my personal time to some of my passion in flying. But hopefully soon enough, I can be flying to the conferences myself,
Right?
and that will be the ultimate goal.
Love it.
But I'll try to make a couple of conferences this year. Midwest Streaming is one that's always eluded me, and I'm trying to make a point to go this time.
Perfect. Perfect. Me too. That's a good one. Well, why don't you, I want to pivot a little bit to talk about entrepreneurship, business ownership, doing freelance, side hustle, full time. There's a lot there, and I think for many people, uh, there's there's missed opportunities with tax advantages, having some business continuity of having something in place over your career. I think there's some benefits that get touched on, but one of the challenges is really running the business side. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about Ahanali, why you started it, what that's a right fit for, and maybe just any thoughts or advice you have about freelancing in general of who it might be a good fit for, how to take advantage of doing that in your career.
Yeah. So it's an interesting conversation, and I I I love the passion and the marketing and folks out there talking about the allure of independent consulting, and it's there. There's nothing that people say that is not true, but like you mentioned, there are things that happen in the background that don't get mentioned, like having to, if you're going to establish an organization, you have to file paperwork every quarter, every year with local, state, and federal authorities. You have to deal with taxes, dealing with taxes at the state level, at the federal level. You have to get your books. No, are we back? Did I get lost?
Yes,
Can
you're
you hear me?
back. You're back.
Okay,
Yep,
sounds
yep,
good.
perfect.
I don't know where I got lost, but basically, there's a lot that you have to do when you're operating an organization, and I'm just talking about the back end side. Talk about also having to figure out your proposal wording if you're going to have a master services agreement. I mean, the list is endless. And people think of independent consulting at times as I just have to go here. I'm just going to do Salesforce work 24/7, and I'm going to love it. So for one, there's a serious. While you mentioned the tax advantages, there is a trade-off of all the work that you have to incur to gain those tax advantages. So I would venture that there's an argument of a switchover point of at what point is it worth to take this as a 1099, right, where you're just kind of taking all the work on yourself without incorporating, and at what point does it make sense to kind of switch over and say, okay, I'm making enough money now that it's worth spending what I'm going to have to spend to manage all of these items. And Ohanali was born out of the idea to service both of those audiences. The idea behind Ohanali is to be able to create a portal to allow independent consultants to be able to have to worry less about the administrative side by providing a platform that not only allows them to be connected with jobs based on their unique Salesforce skill set, but also by running all of the billing, the invoicing, and everything automatically. So that way they can submit the job offers through the platform. The payment method is collected on file once the client accepts, and then all they have to do is really bill. So it reduces a lot of the administrative work, and so that way they can stay focused on doing a little bit more of what they enjoy, which is Salesforce. So it really got born from that. And our hope is to be able to do that as something that can serve both, again, the 1099 folks or the fully incorporated consultants.
Perfect. And then how would somebody that was interested in learning more find out more about Ohanali and get kind of plugged in and connected to you?
They can look up Ohanali on LinkedIn. We have the company page there, and then we also have the website, so they can go on and fill out a form, or feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, and we'll try to answer any questions that you have, whether it's interested on getting started or just interested in the concept in general, and to decide whether it's for you, anything like that. We're here to help.
Perfect. Thank you. And I know one of the being a parent, I know we have that shared those responsibilities, right? And you have a passion for flying, and you have a job and a business. So I often will do one-on-one, coaching with people, and that's a topic that I hear all the time is I feel so overwhelmed, right? I'm overwhelmed by, do I go to the conferences and do I get my next certification? I need to network. Am I going to do a side hustle? It's like there's so many things. So, how do you and your wife approach your life so that have your professional goals, that you meet the desires you have as a parent and having time for each other and your passions? Do you have any things that you advice you have things that work well to allow you to thrive holistically?
So you have to realize that there's only 24 hours in a day, and it takes effort, right? So if there's 100% of your day, you're going to have to dedicate it to certain things, right? If you dedicate a third of it to resting and sleeping, great, that's good too. I'm not going to come here and tell you, oh, only sleep 4 hours, do all these things. Find your balance. The important thing is understanding the boundaries that we're all tied by. So we were talking about flying this year. I told my wife I'm making a conscious decision to get back into flying, finish some flight training, and dedicate time to finding getting an airplane or finding a flying club. So what that meant to me as I started looking is I was like, I have to dedicate time to study. So if I have to study for this the commercial rating that I'm currently studying for, I don't have time to study for Salesforce licenses or certifications. So I'm not going to try any Salesforce licenses certifications this week or this year. And equally, I don't have time to, or as much time to be able to travel and go to conferences. So I have to pick and choose my conferences more carefully because I have these goals in mind. So it's it's kind of like you're realizing how much you have to put in efforts and be able to make a clear decision and say, look, can I cut this off entirely? The mistake that I've made, that I've learned throughout the years, is that I try to do a little bit of everything, and I kept saying yes to everything and trying to do a little bit of everything, and I barely managed to get anything accomplished. So at some point, you just have to have a very black and white saying, look, it's no disrespect, it's nothing bad against anyone else. I am just not doing this because I have X, Y, Z other priorities. Right. And those are the big things. So, I have the 9 to 5, which is my job, and that's dedicated time there. And I have time afterwards, in blocks dedicated to doing things for Ohanali. And equally at the same time, I have, we have time for family time, like our breakfasts are sacred, or taking our daughter to school on our bicycles is sacred. Like, we have our things that we're all scheduled on, and just trying to, make sure that we don't overload yourself, right? Don't take on more than is what within your boundary, because that will start leading to anxiety to get things done, and you don't have enough time to get things done. So those are some of the big pieces that I've learned from my time, especially over the past couple of years since becoming a parent.
It's a game changer. It crystallizes things for sure. That hustle mentality and just grind it out, do all the hours. You just no longer have those hours. So it is that pivot moment of, okay, that strategy isn't going to work anymore. What's something else? I really appreciate what you said about you have clear goals. You're really clear on what you want to do. You put it on the calendar. Like, the priorities are on the calendar. We're not going to mess with our taking our daughter on our bikes to school. Like, it didn't happen by accident. You blocked out the time. I think that's something that's so critical, and for individuals that are really looking for those certs, it's like, where can it fit? And just putting everything down. I think for many of us, when you actually write everything down, try and put it on the calendar, you know why you feel overwhelmed is because it is not possible
Yeah,
with
I
the
mean,
24
that's a
hours.
great point, actually. It's a great exercise to sit down and list everything that you want to accomplish. Because if you're feeling anxious that you don't have enough time in the day and everything, list it all, look at it. Because thinking about it in your head, sometimes you don't get a full picture. And then once you see it all, you're like, there's no way I'm getting all of this done. And maybe you overcommitted. Maybe you told some people that you would do things that you realize that these are the things that you want to cut off. And start working on making those adjustments. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm still saying there's a lot of things that I can do that are better, but we're definitely on a path forward to be able to better manage our times. And both my wife and I are really getting good at kind of making sure that like we're like, okay, here's the time that that we need to do this. Here's the time that we need to do this, and go at it from there. So.
Perfect. Well, I hope that you will post some pictures of flying and keep us informed of your adventures. So I know many love to live vicariously through there. But Erick, I so appreciate you joining me for Lorien Live today. I appreciate your perspective so much and the journey that you've had. And I know that people took away some valuable ideas. So definitely connect with Erick. Do you have any sort of last thoughts or anything that you'd like to share?
Oh man, I don't know if I have a big one. I would just say that, especially in the Salesforce ecosystem, with everything going on, there is a place for everyone. And whatever you need, whatever questions you have, again, I'm happy to point you in the right direction if I can't answer them to you. But there's always someone that's willing to help. I can't stress enough throughout my journey and to see the transformation of the Salesforce ecosystem from LinkedIn groups to success groups to then Trailhead and then all the dreaming conferences and all of the dream forces that have come and gone. It's there's really a lot of amazing people there, and there's never a time that I really wasn't able to find someone to give me a hand when I needed it, and I still need it to this day. And there's a lot of folks that I rely on. I found the channels that mean the most to me, like Ohana Slack is a massive one that I often reach out for help, and I always get people immediately that are willing to help. So find what works for you. Find your place in this Ohana, in this ecosystem, and keep pushing on. And pick your goals, find your niche, find your path, and trailblaze away.
I love it. And I don't know if you've had a chance to hop on to the new Sales Blazer community that's just started up. So you'll see it on LinkedIn if you haven't already, or you can Google it. It's a really interesting community that is being formed, and Salesforce is investing in bringing experts in, and the conversations are really interesting. So for those of you that are on the sales production side, whether that's your role or you're supporting that part of the business, I think there's some really interesting new content. And of course, there's going to be a new certification that comes out that's for the sales world. But that's kind of a new one that I've been delving into in the last week or so. It's been really interesting. But Erick, thank you again. And thank you for everyone joining us today. I so appreciate it. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the comment area. We'll come back and answer them. And if there's anything specific to Erick, I'll tag him later. But thank you again. And we'll be back next Thursday, same time, same day. And I actually have a couple of guests coming on. I'll post that are going to share from a legal perspective and business how to set something up for an inexpensive that sets you up for state and nationally, and helps you get something in place if you want to delve into that. And certainly check out Ohana and connect with Erick. So thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Have a good one.